regular service at 5. Now, we need to have a deacons meeting tonight at 4:30 sharp, if you can be here for that. This is basically a no-brainer, so that's why I'm doing it at 4:30 instead of 4 o'clock, okay? Rick will tell you a little bit about it tonight, and it just has to do with our property line and the farm that's getting bought, and we just need to look that over real quick. It's like I say, to me, it's a no-brainer. I think we'll talk about that tonight. So be here for the deacons meeting at 4:30. All right. Our guest speaker, as I told you, is Brother Howard Adkins. We got a deacons meeting on April 21st, a business meeting April 21st. The Gideons will be here on May the 19th. Our fish fry is going to be May the 25th, and then, of course, Memorial Day is May 27th. So I think I've covered about everything there. If I forgot anything that we need to be aware of, everybody have a prayer list that needs one? All right. I see that we have some that are out. How's Brother Bob doing? How's Bob doing? He isn't doing any better? No better, but no worse? All right. Okay. If we think about it, was Miss Ledbetter here last week? I don't remember. Okay. We may want to reach out to her and reach out to Miss Peggy, and if you look around and you see somebody that you know you haven't seen in a couple of weeks, we may need to just call them and check on them, let them know we're thinking about them and praying for them, and go from there. Who? All right. Mary Rice. Mary Rice, okay. And then somebody else said, yes. Chris and Tammy had a baby, yep. Yep. My phone went off. Somebody who shall remain nameless has put me on like a group chat, and so for some reason or other, when the ladies decide that they need to share all that information, my phone goes off, and I think I got like 27 things that on my. But anyway, from the time she left home, got to the hospital, had the baby, got all the pictures. I didn't have to talk to anybody. My phone was going off, and so anywho, but that's part of it, I guess. All right. Is there anything I've missed, or is there anything anybody would like to say before we get started? Hey, punch him, wake him up. Eddie, it's too early to go to sleep. He ain't started preaching yet. Yes.
I just want to say thank you to everyone that had a part of this last week, and especially Matt and Scott. They done anything and everything I asked them to do. I couldn't do more with myself. So it was a great, great thing that we did.
We're so proud of this tomb, we left it up for another Sunday.
Well, I couldn't get it down. I'm sorry.
It not only reached his church, Steve, it reached a lot of people out on Facebook.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I know a lot of my family and stuff watched it, and that couldn't be here or were going to their church or whatever. But again, I know Brother Atkins is going to bring us a good message this morning, and I do hope y'all will come back tonight, and I think we will enjoy. If you come back tonight, I got something special for you. I know most of you know that how Stephen died and how Paul died and how John died. But there's about 14 or 15 of them that you probably don't know anything about. If you show up tonight, I'm going to give you that. I've even got it wrote into my Bible about how about 14 or 15 of the apostles and the disciples were killed. So that may be something that'll interest you. If you show up tonight, you'll have that. And all right, I guess let's go ahead and take up our offering this morning. Seems like I'm forgetting something, but I don't know what it is. Well, we do that after the offering. Neither one of y'all have a birthday or an anniversary, right? You two? All right. remember your dad? Okay. Scott said if we would please remember his dad, that he's having a hard time with hospice. So we need to remember him. Was there anybody else that we needed to? All right. Ray Alvey.
Friend of mine, he worked with Mandy. He is, what, liver cancer, is that right, Mandy?
Yes.
Now that he just got liver cancer, he had a eye removed about 2 years ago with cancer, now it's in his liver.
All right. Scott, if you don't mind, lead us in a word of prayer and we'll get started.
Lord, as we come to you today, let us recall and remember all the wonderful blessings we receive. Lord, let us be mindful throughout the service to let our hand be upon us and the one here to give us our message, Lord. Let the Holy Spirit work through him, Lord. Remember, let these tithes and offerings go to further your kingdom, Lord, and let us be cheerful givers, Lord. And all these things we ask in Jesus Christ's name. Amen.
Judy, how's Billy Dean? Back, legs, or can't having trouble walking. All right, we need to remember Billy Dean. He's having some trouble walking. Birthdays or anniversaries? Any birthdays or anniversaries? All right. You gonna stand in for him while we sing? Well, you're gonna have to if you're coming up here. You saying you don't flavor him at all? All right. All right, if you would, let's stand and sing Happy Birthday to Bobby. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, God bless you. Happy birthday to you. Let's take 2 or 3 minutes, shake hands, welcome each other, and youth is dismissed to your class. Not going to. She's been so graceful this morning, thanking everybody. Yeah, really I don't. Well, you're all right. We're going to sing page 112, and then we're just going to flip right over and go to page 113. So on page 112, we're going to sing all three. And then on page 113, we're going to sing the first, second, and last. So starting out with page 112, 112. I'm satisfied with just a cottage below, a little silver and a little dough. But in that city where the ransom will shine, I want a gold one, that silver line. I've got a mansion just over the hilltop in that bright land where we'll never grow old, and someday on earth we'll never more wander, but walk the streets that are pure as gold, though often tempted, tormented and tested, and like the prophet, my pillow is stone. And though I find here no permanent dwelling, I know He'll give me a mansion my own. I've got a mansion just over the hilltop in that bright land where we'll never grow, and someday on earth we'll never more wander, but walk the streets that are pure as gold. Don't think me poor heart, deserted or lonely, I'm not discouraged, I'm heaven bound. I'm just a pilgrim in search of a city. I want a mansion, a harp and a crown. I've got a mansion just over the hilltop in that bright land where we'll never grow, and someday on earth we'll never more wander, but walk the streets that are pure as gold. Judy, I do that just for you. All right, page 113, first, second, last. I've a home prepared where the saints abide, just over in the glory land. And I long to be by my Savior's side, just over in the glory land. Just over in the glory land, there with the mighty host I'll stand, just over in the glory land. Just over in the glory land, there with the mighty host I'll stand. Just over in the glory land. I am on my way to that mansion fair, just over in the glory land. There to sing God's praises and his glory there, just over in the glory land. Just over in the glory land, I'll join the happy angel band. Just over in the glory land. Just over in the glory land, there with the mighty host I'll stand. Just over in the glory land. With the blood-washed throng I will shout and sing, just over in the glory land. Glad hosannas to Christ the Lord and King, just over in the glory land. Just over in the glory land, I'll join the happy angels band. Just over in the glory land. Just over in the glory land, there with the mighty host I'll stand. Just over in the glory land.
Good morning. What a privilege it is to be here with you guys this morning. And let me make sure I've got this thing off. Yeah, it's off. And it's got its recording. I record all of my messages because sometimes I have trouble sleeping at night. I can just turn that on and go right to sleep. So that works out pretty good. It's such a thrill to be here. I've not been out here in a ton of Sundays, month of Sundays. And I miss seeing you guys. We've had 10 or 12 churches out of 50 that was out pastored during the last many months, and we have 4 more that got pastors just in the last few weeks. Bandana called Brandon Bramlett, who used to serve here. He's back there. And then Kevel called a new pastor. You haven't got to know yet, but John, you'll get to see him soon enough. And then Fremont has a new pastor, and let's see, Mount Pleasant called a new pastor. So we are just praising God for the things that are going on. Our churches are working together throughout this year to try to share the gospel, plant as many seeds as we can of the gospel, do as much watering and cultivating of seeds that have already been planted, and do harvesting of crops that are coming in. We're seeing a lot of people get saved every week. We're seeing more people get saved than we've been seeing get saved in a long time. And some of them are people you thought they're too far gone to get saved. And some of them are children. And we're having people from all over sharing the gospel. One of our churches where I was at the other day, they were talking about the pastor encouraging everybody to be sharing the gospel with folks. And they came back, and one little 3rd grade boy says, the pastor says, "What have you been doing to share the gospel?" And he said, "This is what I did. I got up in my class at school." He's a 3rd grader. He says, "Now I want to invite all of you all who want to study the Bible to meet me at recess." Got a group at recess he's sharing the gospel with. I remember a few years ago, one of our, the granddaughter of one of our former pastors who's now passed on, she used to go with her grandfather to visit all the nursing homes, and he'd share the gospel and encourage people, and they'd sing. And they had some snow days, 2 or 3 snow days there, and here in McCracken in Ballard County, and she couldn't go to school. And so when they went back to school, she was meeting with her best friend, also a 3rd grader, and her friend just started crying. She said, "What's wrong?" She said, "Oh, it's so terrible. My parents are getting a divorce, and I don't know what's going to happen, and I'm just scared to death. I don't have any hope." And she said to her, "Well, I've got just who you need. I've got what you need. What is it?" They sat down at lunchtime together. and she shared Jesus with her and led her best friend to Christ in the cafeteria at her school, and her granddaddy got to baptize her. Her daddy's the former sheriff in McCracken County, Matt Carter. And I'm seeing all these kids. I'm hearing about youth all over our state, all over our county, with Disciple Now weekends and all these things that are going on. And our young people are pumped about sharing the gospel. It's exciting to hear that. But you know, what I need to understand is every time we meet together, one of the great purposes we have as meeting together is to encourage each other, to help to train and edify and build up each other. And we want to make sure all of us are doing all that we can to help every family be strengthened. When I was pastor in Colorado Springs, Colorado back in the 70s, 85% of our church were either active military or retired and former military. We had a big hospital there. We had Fort Carson with the Army. We had Peterson Field with the Air Force. We had the Air Force Academy. We had the Olympic Training Center. And we had NORAD, where they run wars when those things take place. I could look out my bedroom window and see NORAD over there. And so we had all of these military. So pretty much every Sunday we were saying goodbye to somebody that Uncle Sam was transferring to some other part around the world. That means if we didn't win 100 people every year, we'd lost 100 people and they hadn't been replaced, so you'd go down to nothing. And so we baptized a ton of folks, and my wife started a program to teach English as a second language, because all these military guys were marrying young ladies from other countries. They'd come here, they didn't know our culture, they didn't know our language, and many times the marriages didn't work out. And can you imagine your daughter being married to some foreigner off in another place, and they get divorced, and there she is stuck and can't speak the language, doesn't know anybody. So my wife started this program to teach English to all these people, and so we had like 36 countries and 18 different languages, but the two predominant were Korean and Spanish. So we had a lot of Spanish work going on, so we started a Korean church. And within 2 years, the Korean church was bigger than the English-speaking church. And it was so interesting to see that helping people with practical issues like learning a language, learning how to drive, get your license, get legal, get a bank account, and having our people to love on people who were displaced and who didn't have a family there. I remember we would have Thanksgiving. Here's something you might think about. We had Thanksgiving. We'd have a Quaker breakfast. Early in the morning, the men of the church would let the women, you'd say, let them sleep. No, they were home preparing lunch. The men, we'd meet at church and prepare a big breakfast for everybody. And everybody'd come, and we'd have everything you can imagine, and we'd all eat too much. And then we would go into the auditorium and sit down. No agenda. No special anything. People would come, and as the Spirit moved them, they would stand up and say, I want to give thanks to God for this year, for this thing he did with my family. Or I want to give thanks that I came to know Jesus this year, and I've got my two friends here who led me to Jesus, and I found the family. And somebody else would get over here and say, you know, I lost my dad or my mom, and it was really tough, but God has been good to me. And we'd stay there as long as people were talking, and when the last one, whoever it was, stood up and sat down, nobody else stood up, we would go home. And people at the church would always invite people who had come into our community that were not from our community to go home and have Thanksgiving with them. What a beautiful, beautiful tradition. After we left Calvary Baptist Church in Colorado Springs, God took us overseas for the next 30 years to be one of those displaced people we call missionaries for the International Mission Board. And so I was on the receiving end of being invited to people's houses, believers and unbelievers, to celebrate all their holidays and special days, and lead our churches in doing the same thing with other people that came. I want to encourage you to look around. There are people who are displaced people who are in our community. And we need to find them and share the love of Jesus with them, and develop relationships so that we can have a personal relationship and say, hey, what's the hope that you have in life? You know, the big thing is that if you're not a believer in God, if you don't believe in our Creator and His Son, Jesus Christ, you have no hope. You believe that when you die, that's just it. You don't believe that you're going to have the opportunity to reunite with your family and loved ones in heaven with our loving Heavenly Father if you don't believe in Jesus, if you don't believe in God. You don't have hope that there's anybody that can help you. You just got to be able to do it yourself. I'm pretty strong. I'm fairly smart. I learned a long time ago, not much can I get done by myself. We need each other, but more than that, we need to depend upon our all-powerful, all-knowing, always present God to sustain us. And I just want to encourage Ohio Valley Baptist Church to be thinking about all the people that all of us come in contact with regularly, and all the people this year that God will put us in contact with. It may be the only time ever. What are we doing to make sure we're taking light to darkness and bringing hope to people who have no hope? Because you see, we are the called and the commissioned ones to do it. And I'm not talking about preachers. I'm talking about disciples. I'm talking about all of us as believers. When I was at Colorado Springs, I didn't realize that when Uncle Sam was sending people out, before he sent them, while we had them, we had an opportunity to be equipping and preparing and training and strengthening those families so that wherever they went, they were God's people on mission to take the gospel wherever they were sent. And I was thinking this morning, driving out here, I said, what a great opportunity that I have this morning to try to strengthen and encourage the families that are here, because you have an opportunity also with your own family to be preparing them. I have 4 grandchildren. I get to see them 2 or 3 times a year because when God brought us back to here, they're all down in Georgia. And so I'm still a displaced grandparent, you know. I don't get to see them too much, but they came up to see me this past weekend. I have a birthday this month, and if you want my sizes or anything, I'll be glad to give them to you, or to my favorite place to be, just let me know and I'll answer any questions. But 2 of my grandsons also have birthdays this month, one today, one tomorrow. So we had a get-together, and you know what you do, we eat. So we went to Pizza Inn was full, so we went to the Mellow Mushroom Pizza place. I highly encourage it. Great experience, big, comfortable, do a great job there. Pizza's good. So, but we had time to spend together and go out with my grandsons and my daughters and my son-in-law yesterday. We went to the shooting range because I've got a gun for him, my grandkids. They need to know how to shoot, and they're right in the middle. They live in a place just off of Nowhere Road out in the country from Athens, Georgia. So we got 30 acres of woods there and everything. So you got a great place to teach these kids. So he's a former policeman. We went to the shooting range. What a great day, no wind, great sun yesterday. And my son-in-law and I, who's a great discipler, he and my daughter disciple young couples. And couples in the churches there that are getting ready for marriage, they go take them through a training thing and help them. And they're always getting bunches of people together, strengthening families. And I said, you know, what are you doing with these? You got a 19-year-old, a 17-year-old, and a 14-year-old boys at home still. One going to college but living at home. I said, what are you doing to help them walk closer to Jesus, to love Jesus? Because they get so distracted on sports and school and these little blue-eyed, blonde-headed girls that walk around and brown-eyed, brown-haired girls. I said, they can't stay focused for 10 seconds. What do you do? He says, it's really tough. But right now we're studying a book together about that same thing. And so they have their assignments and they're going stuff. They've always had family devotions. And they do stuff together with family, and they limit their electronic intake and all that kind of stuff. But he says it is so challenging to keep these kids growing in the Lord. And I started thinking, as a pastor, wow. My wife always says, I wish we lived in Georgia where we could have more input into our grandkids' life. And I've got to tell her, but I don't have the courage to do it. So maybe one of you all can. I said, really, that's not our main job. Our job was to prepare their mom and their dad to do it. And our two daughters are a lot stronger, more disciplined Christians than my wife and I are. I mean, they just put us to shame. And so I have complete confidence in my daughter and my sons-in-laws to do what they need to do. My job is to encourage them and pray for them and do what I can with the grandkids, but I don't see them that much. All of us here in the same situation, right? What are we doing to make a difference? Because I guarantee you, even though we have a lot of Christian teachers in schools, when they go somewhere else, and even here many times, they're going to get a whole bunch of stuff that says, that stuff at the Bible and church, that's just fairy tales. That's just a story. The real truth is other. So the family is where we need to be strengthening the family so that they can be growing. But the sad thing is, at least in Ballard and McCracken County, we got a lot of people raising kids who are just kids. And they're more immature than a 14-year-old or 12-year-old. And the drug problem and all of these different things. We got grandparents who are like that as well. I mean, we got some crazies that when I was a kid, we never would have thunk it possible. But it is. So the reality is, Ohio Valley Baptist Church has the important task of winning people who don't know Jesus and strengthening families and strengthening each other, iron sharpens iron, and helping us to understand that we are God's army and we are responsible not only for this part of the world, but every other part of the world, and we're constantly receiving and sending out people. So what kind of job are we doing? We cannot judge how well we are doing by our buildings, our budgets, and just our baptism. What are we doing to make an impact in the lives of our families and therefore in our community? Because we live among people who are the walking dead if they do not know Jesus Christ. And we live among a bunch of people who at some point in their life has had some kind of contact with Jesus and his church, even though it doesn't look like it or sound like it. Right? I want to just think about that this morning. If you'll turn in Mark chapter 5, we're going to look at three short, where's the time go? I really talked about it. 3 short stories that illustrate the kind of people we're sharing the gospel with. Mark chapter 5, verse 21. Mark 5:21. When Jesus had crossed over again in the boat to the other side, a large crowd gathered around him, and so he stayed by the seashore. One of the synagogue officials named Jairus came up and on seeing Jesus, fell at his feet and implored him earnestly, saying, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Please come and lay your hands on her so that she will get well and live." Here's a father who's frightened to death, and he's searching to find help for his little daughter. And so Jesus went off with him, and a large crowd was following him and pressing in on him. We won't read the story here of the lady who had the issue of blood, but it shows that in Jesus, between going to solve an emergency, a girl that was dying took time to heal and minister to a lady who'd been sick for a long time. And he understood and knew exactly what her problem is. Friends, no matter who we are, we need to understand God knows all about us, and he's always ready and willing to take care of us and stop in the middle of something else because he's got the power to take care of it, to take care of you, to take care of us. Don't ever think that when we're ministering to everybody else, that God is not aware of our problems and will just give everything that we need. So, verse 35. And while he was still speaking, they came from the house of the synagogue official, saying, "Your daughter has died. Why trouble the teacher anymore?" But Jesus, overhearing what was being spoken, said to the synagogue official, "Do not be afraid any longer, only believe." And he allowed no one to accompany him except Peter and James and John, the brother of James. And they came to the house of the synagogue official, and he saw a commotion and people loudly weeping and wailing. And entering in, he said to them, "Why make a commotion and weep? The child has not died, but is asleep." And they began laughing at him. But putting them all out, he took along the child's father and mother and his own companions and entered the room where the child was. Taking the child by the hand, he said to her, "Talitha cumi," which translated means, "Little girl, I say to you, get up." Immediately, the girl got up and began to walk, for she was 12 years old. And immediately they were completely astounded. And he gave them strict orders that no one should know about this, and he said that something should be given her to eat. Stop thinking about that a moment. How long had that girl been dead? She just died. She was 12 years old. The rose was still on her face. She was still, it didn't look like she was dead. But she was dead. What did Jesus say? Took her by the hand. He said, "Little girl, darling, get up." And she did. And then what did he say? He said, "Give her something to eat. She's weak. She needs strength." What do new believers need? Something to eat. They don't want a sirloin steak, but I'm sorry to say they will later. Your grocery bill will go up. They need what they need. And they can't feed themselves for a while. You teach them to feed themselves. We need to make sure when people get saved, we understand that they don't automatically have all the knowledge that we have. One of the things when I came back from overseas, after being 30 years overseas and came back, I made the mistake of thinking that everybody thought the way that I thought and understood the way that I think, which, is always the right thing. And I didn't understand that everybody hadn't had the same experiences that I had had. And some people grew up on families that were a train wreck. And I grew up on a family that was very loving and so forth. I mean, we weren't perfect, but taken to church, taught the basic things, family devotions, all that stuff. And for me, holidays were great because the family was going to get together. For some people, we hated, I don't want to be with my family over here. Didn't understand it. But I assumed things that weren't true. Listen, everybody that comes to this church, before they get saved, after they get saved, they've got their history, and they probably don't think the way that we do. But when they get saved, we need to understand you got to feed them. You got to help them grow. You need to encourage them. And we need to keep on doing that. So, let's go to Luke chapter 7. Luke chapter 7. I don't want to keep you too long, because some of you will go to sleep. Luke chapter 7, verse 11. Soon afterwards, he went to a city called Nain, and his disciples were going along with him, accompanied by a large crowd. All of us who are in ministry and we're teaching others, remember, it's always good to have some people go along with you, because you're training, you're teaching folks. I'll never forget, I was in Nashville, Tennessee on furlough. My wife was, we were on furlough. We came home for medical furlough, and my wife was getting treatment at Vanderbilt Hospital. And we lived with a doctor friend there in Nashville. And he's from Eastern Kentucky. He had a sign in his front yard that says, "Forget the dog, beware of owner." He's a great guy, great guy. And we were going out to visit one Monday night, and I was his partner in it. He was doing the sharing, I was doing the praying. We got in talking with this couple, young couples on Monday night, and we were in there, and I was praying and with my eyes open and listening to what he was saying, and all of a sudden he said, "Thank you all so much for having us here today. If it's okay, we'll come back at another time when you're not as busy as you are and when it's be more convenient to you. Thank you so much. God bless you." And we were out. We got to the car, and I said, "Roy, why did we get up and leave so much?" He says, "I'm a surgeon, and sometimes I do general surgery, and I get in and I find out I can't do anything here. It's not the time for this surgery, or they need somebody else that can do a better job than me. So I close up as cleanly and as quickly as I can, and I back out so somebody else or me can go back in at another time that's more appropriate." He said, same way here. They were being very polite and listening and so forth. But I could see him. He had one eye on us and the other one on the football game, Monday night football, that was in the living room, and he was more interested in that. And I says, we were wasting our time because they didn't have their heart in it. So we backed up and got out. I said, "You doctors are halfway smart, aren't you? That's pretty good. That's pretty good." So here we find Jesus has his disciples with him. Verse 12, "Now as he approached the gate of the city, a dead man was being carried out, the only son of his mother, and she was a widow. And a sizable crowd from the city was with her. When the Lord saw her, he felt compassion for her and said to her, 'Do not weep.' And he came up and touched the coffin. And the bearers came to a halt. And he said, 'Young man, I say to you, arise, get up.' The dead man sat up and began to speak. And Jesus gave him back to his mother." How long had this guy been dead? Less than 24 hours, because they buried within 24 hours. He'd been dead longer than that girl. He'd also lived longer. A young man meant that he was probably less than 30 years old. But he'd been dead. Now we have people of all ages who are the walking dead. Children, young people, young adults, middle adults, senior adults, who are the walking dead if they've not come to know Jesus. And so he looked more dead than that little girl, but he wasn't any more dead. They were both dead. Dead is dead. What did Jesus say to him? Jesus gave him back to his mother, restored that relationship. Wow. The third one, John chapter 11. I'm telling you these because I'm hoping you'll remember them, because this is a great thing for you to use when you're sharing with people, but also to help us remember that we live among the living dead. John chapter 11, you remember that? Verse 1, "Now a certain man was sick, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha." Remember Martha and Mary? Very close friends of Jesus. "It was the Mary who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, saying, 'Lord, behold, he whom you love is sick.' But when Jesus heard this, he said, 'This sickness is not to end in death, but for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified by it.' Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that he was sick, He stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. We would say, that makes no sense at all. Have you ever learned down through life that we don't understand God's ways and work most of the time? We want to tell God what to do and even in our prayer life, we spend way more time telling him and talking to him than listening to him. Duh. We're so stupid. I mean, I just can't believe. I'll be 75-year-old this month. I can't believe how stupid I am. I still try to talk more to the Lord than listen to him. It's crazy. But I learned it from some real good people. So what did he say? He stayed in the place where he was. Then after this, he said to the disciples, let us go to Judea again. And the disciples said to him, Rabbi, the Jews were just now seeking to stone you. And are you going there again? And Jesus answered, are there not 12 hours of the day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble because he sees the light of this world. But if anyone walks in the night, he stumbles because the light is not in him. Then he said, and after that he said to them, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I go so that I may awaken him out of sleep. The disciples then said to him, Lord, if he's fallen asleep, he will recover. Now Jesus had spoken of his death, but they thought that he was speaking of literal sleep. So Jesus then said to them plainly, Lazarus, he is dead. And I am glad for your sakes that I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us now go to him. Therefore Thomas, who is called Didymus, said to his fellow disciples, let us also go so that we may die with him. So when Jesus came, he found that he had already been in the tomb 4 days. He'd been dead longer, but my friends, he was not any deader. Age and time does not make you deader. When you're born into this world, you're dead spiritually. And you only receive life when you come to know Jesus. Verse 18, now Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles off, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them concerning their brother. Martha, therefore, when she heard that Jesus was coming, went to meet him, but Mary stayed at the house. Then Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you'd been here, my brother wouldn't have died. Even now I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you. And Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live even if he dies. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? She said to him, yes, Lord, I have believed that you are the Christ, the Son of God, even he who comes into the world. When she had said this, she went away and called Mary, her sister, saying secretly, the teacher is here and is calling for you. And when she heard it, she got up quickly and was coming to him. Now Jesus had not yet come into the village, but was still in the place where Martha met him. Then the Jews who were with her in the house and consoling her, when they saw that Mary got up quickly and went out, they followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to weep there. Therefore, when Mary came where Jesus was, she saw him and fell at his feet, saying to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus therefore saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and was troubled. Jesus wept. So the Jews were saying, see how he loved him. But some of them said, could not this man who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man also from dying? So Jesus, again being deeply moved within, came to the tomb. Now it was a cave, and a stone was lying against it. Jesus said, remove the stone. Martha, the sister of the deceased, said to him, Lord, by this time there will be a stench, for he's been dead 4 days. Jesus said to her, did I not say to you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? So they removed the stone. Then Jesus raised his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you've heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but because of the people standing around, I said it so that they may believe that you sent me. When he had said these things, he cried out with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth! The man who had died came forth, bound hand and foot with wrappings, and his face was wrapped around with a cloth. Jesus said to them, unbind him and let him go. He'd been dead longer, 4 days. Was he more dead? No, he was dead. The same Jesus with the same voice said, Lazarus, get out of there, come forth. And the dead, when he heard the voice of Jesus, responded. Let me ask you a question. How many of the walking dead around us are not hearing the voice of Jesus because we're not reading it to them? We're not sharing it. We're not living it before them. They didn't get saved without hearing the voice of Jesus. When they heard it and they obeyed, they found life. Friends, we're going to have to give an account to God, not just me. I'm going to have to give an account to God, not just for all the people I've not shared with, but because I haven't been faithful enough to challenge you guys and demand that you be more serious in sowing, cultivating, and harvesting. I want to ask you a question. If the world came to an end as we now know it tomorrow, how many of the people that you love, or that you even know, are going to spend eternity away from God in a devil's hell, and we could have done something about it? A few months ago, I was talking to my friend Mike Williams, who retired as administrative pastor at Lone Oak First. And I asked Mike about his 90-something-year-old father, who's a former whatever three-letter agency he worked with. He was a spy, okay, for a retired, tremendously devout Christian brother. And he's either 92 or 93. And I said, Mike, how's your dad? Because he told me about he'd gone over to share the gospel with a guy in the neighborhood who was out cutting his grass, and he's kind of known as a crazy guy. And he got up the guy to turn off his mower, and he shared with him about Jesus. And the guy says, don't come to me with that Bible and that Jesus stuff. I already have a religion. He said, what's your religion? He said, I'm a Muslim Methodist. He said, what does that mean? And the guy couldn't tell him, but he said, what you need is Jesus. If you don't have a relationship with Jesus, you're lost. You need Jesus. The guy said, not interested, but he kept sharing. A few weeks later, I saw Mike again. I said, Mike, what's your dad been up to? And he said, well, yesterday, he went across the street to this apartment building. I think he owns it. And he went to visit a man there who was on hospice and was dying. He had a oxygen mask on. And he said he went and asked if he could talk to him. And he talked to him, and he took about 30 minutes to share the gospel with him. And he said to the man, now don't you want to give your life to Jesus and repent of your sins and ask Jesus to save you? And he said, not now. Maybe later. Not now. He says, but you don't have any guarantee there'll be a later. No, not now. And he kept insisting to no, so he left. Went back home. About an hour and a half later, a bit over an hour and a half later, somebody from over there came, knocked on his door, and he said, you may want to come over. The man you were sharing with died an hour and a half after you left. And he went over and he said, well, how did he die? He went over and showed him he had unhooked the oxygen, put it aside, turned it off, and he lit up a cigarette sitting up in bed. But he didn't understand that oxygen accumulates down in your chest, and it just blew him up. And the imprint of his body on that wooden floor was there. So Mike's dad called his son after that, and he said, "Son, I wonder how he would have responded when I asked him to receive Jesus if he knew he just had 90 minutes to live." A lot of people just have 90 minutes to live. What are we going to do about it? I'm afraid our real problem is not that we're afraid, not that we don't know how. It's just that we love other things more than we love Jesus. And just as my grandsons get distracted by girls and any kind of ball or sport and other things, we do too. The enemy will try to disable us, distract us, or discourage us. And our job is to encourage and challenge, pat us each other on the back, and lower as needed, to make sure we all understand that sharing the gospel is a team sport. Sometimes I sow a seed that somebody else waters and somebody else harvests. And sometimes I get to harvest the seed that somebody else has sown, somebody else has watered. And sometimes I never get to see those things. Doesn't matter. The Lord of the harvest sends his workers into the field to work. And we are them. Let's pray. Father, I want to pray your blessings on Ohio Valley Baptist Church, every member, every family, every person associated in any way. And Father, I pray that everyone who's a part of this church will be faithful to pray and obey without delay today, because we have no promise of tomorrow. Father, thank you for your word, which is so very clear, and the responsibilities that you have given to your people. Father, may we be found faithful to not only trust you as we try to give leadership to our families, but trust you as we sow, cultivate, and harvest the seeds so that more people come into your family. Lord, bless Greg and his family as they're taking a time of rest, visiting with their family. Protect them. Give them safe traveling journeys, and others who are away do the same. For it's in Jesus' name that we do pray. Amen. Don't know if there's anybody here that's never given your heart to Jesus, but you may not have 90 minutes. You may not have 9 minutes. You may have 9 years. I don't know. If you're here and you've never given your heart to Jesus, you need to do it today. I'm going to be here at the front. I'd love to pray with you and talk with you about that. Perhaps you're here today and God's spoken to your heart, and you know there's some things in your life that need to change so that you can do what God asks you to do. Sometimes that means you have to say no to some things so you can say yes to some things, because there's 24 hours in a day, 7 days in a week, and no matter how hard you pray, you've only got that to work with. So what do you have to not do so you can do some other things? That's a decision you have to make. But remember, you pray and you obey without delay today, because that's God's plan. Let's stand together. What are we going to sing?
Page 149.
Decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus.
I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back, no turning back. Though God go with me, still I will follow. No one go with me, still I will follow.
God bless you.
No one go with
Bless my sister and give her everything she needs to be all that you want her to be for your glory and for the goodness of the people that you want to bless through her. Bring healing to her body and give her all the strength that she needs spiritually and physically.
The cross before me, no turning back, no turning back.
Listen, I want to thank you all for being so patient with me.